In the final days of the Second World War, Germany found itself in a delusional period of desperation and fanaticism. From 1943 to 1945, the Nazi leadership, intoxicated by ideological blindness, pursued increasingly extreme measures in their bid for ultimate victory. As we delve into this dismal situation, we explore the insidious plans of Hitler and his generals to achieve their aims or else punish the German population they deemed cowardly and traitorous. By February 1943, the cracks on the Eastern Front were glaring. The Battle of Stalingrad had concluded, leaving both the Soviets and Nazis battered. However, while the Soviets could endure the losses, Germany was being drained of oil, manpower, and hope. Joseph Goebbels, the infamous Minister of Propaganda, sought to rally the German people with promises of total war. But no amount of rhetoric could save the Third Reich. Operation Fall Blau, or Case Blue, launched in June 1942, aimed to seize the oil fields in the Caucasus and cut off Soviet resupply routes. Yet, this operation only worsened Germany's oil crisis. The scorched earth tactics of the Soviets and the overstretched supply lines left German offensives floundering. Stalingrad marked the deepest Nazi penetration into the Soviet Union, but the offensive was ultimately repelled, leaving Germany's ambitions in tatters. Despite these setbacks, Nazi officials clung to some optimism. The failed Allied raid at Dieppe in August 1942 and heavy casualties inflicted by the Luftwaffe on Allied bombers suggested that Germany might still win the war in the air. Hopes were pinned on cutting-edge jet fighters like the Me-262. However, Germany's answer to its challenges was the creation of increasingly complex Wunderwaffe, or wonder weapons, which only exacerbated existing logistical problems. Fuel shortages were a constant concern, and the Germans relied heavily on slave labor from concentration camp inmates to power their desperate war efforts. Albert Speer, Hitler's armament minister, struggled to keep German industry afloat, employing schemes that paradoxically worsened the economic situation. Hitler and his advisors, blinded by ideology, dismissed practical considerations, viewing the war as an apocalyptic struggle of racial supremacy. Even after the failure of Case Blue, Hitler insisted on offensive operations. Summer 1943 saw Operation Citadel, a massive attack on the Soviet salient around Kursk. It became one of the largest tank battles in history, with German forces attempting and failing to break through Soviet defenses. This marked a turning point as Germany shifted to a permanent defensive stance, despite maintaining an effective fighting force. The Allies invaded Italy, but progress was slow due to fierce German resistance. Hitler hoped that internal divisions within the Allied forces would collapse their cooperation, but reality struck in June 1944 when the Normandy landings breached the Atlantic Wall, causing significant German casualties. Operation Bagration in the east further shattered German lines with heavy losses of men and material. Desperate to replace losses, Germany raised Volksgrenadier divisions and the Volkssturm, a paramilitary militia of civilian males aged 16 to 60. However, the Volkssturm was under-equipped and poorly trained, relying on makeshift weapons like the Einheitsflammenwerfer, a single-shot flamethrower. Despite propaganda efforts to inspire resistance, the Volkssturm could not significantly alter the war's outcome. In a final gamble, Hitler ordered Operation Wacht am Rhein, an armored attack through the Ardennes, in December 1944. The goal was to split the Allied forces and force Britain into negotiations. Initially successful, the offensive soon faltered due to fierce American resistance and a lack of fuel. This failure exhausted Germany's reserves, leaving them vulnerable to Soviet advances. By January 1945, the Soviets launched the Vistula-Oder offensive, driving deep into Poland and reaching the Oder River. The German defense crumbled, and fear swept through Berlin as citizens realized the Soviets were at their doorstep. Despite last-ditch efforts to defend the capital, Soviet forces stormed Berlin, culminating in the capture of the Reichstag. Hitler, isolated in the Führer bunker, faced the inevitable. On April 30th, 1945, he committed suicide, leaving Nazi Germany leaderless. With his death, the war effectively ended, as many of his followers chose death over a world without National Socialism. On May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally, marking the collapse of a regime that had caused untold suffering. Germany's plans in the final years of the war were reactionary and short-sighted, driven by desperation rather than strategic brilliance. Whether launching offensives in the east or raising militias at home, their efforts were doomed by a lack of resources, leadership, and realistic objectives. Hitler, far from a military genius, was a tyrant driven by a delusional vision, whose final act of defiance was to leave a legacy of ruin. If you enjoyed this content, visit our channel for more stories like this. Please like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow. Also, let us know in the comments where you are watching from.